Welcome back to the Illuminations Media Network. I'm Tamara Westwood, your host, and I'm excited to bring you some more very exciting and informational data for your mind, for your body, and for your spirit. Today, I have a colleague of mine from many years ago at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, Leigh Spusta. Leigh Spusta is a sound engineer. He's also a hypnotherapist, and he's also a very, very exciting pioneer in the area of sound healing, which is our very interesting topic today. And so, Leigh, you've been on the show, maybe about a decade ago.
Wow.
Decade sounds so long ago, so maybe around 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so you're back. I'm so grateful that you could take the time out. But I think that now is a really good time to talk about sound healing. We are bombarded with a lot of EMF waves. We've got the 5G about to happen, and people are waking up. People are waking up to the benefits of sound, cymatics, that whole field. So, because you haven't been with our folks and our family for a while, please share a little bit about yourself. I only share just a wee bit about who you are.
Oh, I understand that. I've been interested in sound, since I was probably about 12 years old. Even before that, I was into music like a lot of kids, but I was always listening to those melodies and rhythms and trying to figure them out. And so I picked up guitar and, started learning instruments when I was a teenager. And that kind of eventually coincided with my interest in spirituality and metaphysics, and especially things like, when you hear George Harrison playing the sitar, I'm like, what's going on with that? And so you start looking into the music of India and, what their approach to sound and music is. And they have a much greater and longer history of the sacred element of sound and music and how it can affect consciousness. And I started learning about that. And then finally, it's been about 21 years ago, I ended up at HMI, College of Hypnotherapy. And I was called, kind of synchronistically to show up there. And those were what I learned there were like the missing pieces that I needed to start really understanding how I can take sound and music and bring it to people in a way that facilitates change, healing, meditative and hypnotic states, and just the resonance within that allows we all have an innate intelligence, I believe, whether it's our higher self or a connection to the universe. And some types of sound and music kind of create a pathway for people to access that and kind of shift the perspective away from the busy mind that tries to just rationalize everything, or the worrying mind that wants to, just get frantic over stuff. And we have a layer of consciousness, you could say it's either below that or above that, but that isn't worried and isn't trying to figure it out. It just knows. And I feel that sound is a way to kind of a direct pathway to that. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years, is putting together the soundtracks that are, intended to do that in different ways, create different avenues, some things for more metaphysically minded people, and some things that are just for getting into a deep sleepful state, like a deep delta, theta music, alpha music. And so that's kind of what I've been doing, and helping others also with their recordings and blending my music with their voice. And as also, I myself create hypnosis and imagery products as well. So that's kind of what I've been doing, and experimenting also with, as you had brought up previous to recording this, I have a sound table which allows people to lay on it, and there's a vibroacoustic element to sound that if you have the ability to pass the low frequency sound through a resonating surface, such as the sound table, which is basically like a very large speaker enclosure. All the bass frequencies are moving through the body, so every cell in the body is resonating with that vibration. And so it's kind of like being surrounded by a 100 monks chanting Om, and it's a very powerful experience. And so we're looking at that. We've been doing that for a while. I'm looking at ways to kind of bring that to people in a more, in an easier way, because just having one person with one sound table, that's a little limiting. And I'm not even in a position to have people just come and check it out all the time. So, for instance, at HMI, we're looking at creating one of the rooms where we can actually embed a vibroacoustic system into the stage, where multiple people could experience that at one time and do groups. So I'm looking into that. And then to finalize an introduction, I too have recognized that in the last, I guess since we've talked, the last decade, there has been a definite increase in people being interested in sound healing, in the resonance of sound, its capacity to shift consciousness and for healing. It's just getting bigger and bigger, because I think people are, intuitively understanding that there's a powerful thing there. Sound baths have become a much more popular thing. So it's exciting to know that it's broadening, it's opening up, and people are waking up to this idea.
No, that's awesome. You spoke to the brainwave levels. You spoke to the theta and the alpha. And as hypnotherapists, we know the importance of that, of shifting the consciousness so that we can enter into that subconscious realm and suggest change to the individual. And if you could, just break that down a bit to our listeners who may not know very much about those levels of consciousness.
Sure. There's 4 basic levels, even though there have been some new levels added in the last while. One of the more recent ones is epsilon, and then there's gamma. But let me start with the basic ones. So when we're in our normal chatterbox mind, we're in a beta state. So those are the fastest brain waves, and that's when we're using our logic and our reason, and we're trying to pay attention to things that require our focus. So, working on something, doing some math problem, our basic busy mind is beta. And that works for us, but if we stay in beta too long, we start to get stressed out, because it is very active. And if we don't have an outlet for it, then it turns into a feeling of anxiety or stress. And so the state below that is alpha, and that's when our brainwaves start to settle down a little bit, and they move down, whereas beta is more in the 13 to 18 to 20, depending on who you talk to, brainwave state cycles per second. So 13 to 20 cycles per second is the beta. Now below that, you have basically from 8 to 12. That's alpha. And when we're in alpha, it's a very natural, calm state. We're still awake, we're still focused, but we're in a more calm, receptive place. And some people experience that as a light meditation, or maybe you just get a little daydreamy. Or even when you're reading a book, it engages that part of the mind that you start to be a little loose and more receptive. And it's a lot less stressful, and it's a more ideal state that we want people to be able to experience every day, to kind of hit that reset button. And it's not hard to get into. Typically, all people need to do is close their eyes and take a few deep breaths, and they start propagating alpha waves. And then below that, we have the theta. Now, theta is from 4 to 7, or right below 8, let's say 7.9. And theta is more deeper kind of meditative or hypnotic state, or, if we're asleep and we're dreaming, there's a lot of theta. If we're having deeper spiritual experiences, there's probably a good amount of theta going on. It's also when we're in a very creative space, we're having a lot of theta. And brainwave activity can coincide. You can have some theta with alpha and beta. It's never just one thing. It's just what's dominant. And so if you're theta dominant at a given moment, then you're going to be more in a creative or a deeper, inner awareness state, and or perhaps off in dreamland. And then finally, the delta is the deeper, not quite the deepest, but because, like I said, they're finding new categories of rhythms, but typically it's the lowest that we engage in. So when we're in the deep dreamless sleep, we're usually in primarily delta, and that's from about 0.5 up to 4 cycles per second. And that's when our body is recharging, resetting, renewing. It's all the cells are doing their thing to get prepared for the next day. So that's our restorative type of state. Now, that what we want to do sometimes, if somebody needs physical healing, we might want to bring up some of those delta rhythms, even if they're not sleeping, because there's a restorative quality. There's communication that happens when there's enough delta that the body starts understanding, okay, it's time to really release stress, let go, and allow harmony and balance to set in, so we can really hit that restart button. And now beyond that, we do have the gamma, which is above the beta thinking mindset. And the gamma is exhibited with monks that are in a very high conscious state. They exhibit gamma waves. Or if somebody's having a psychic experience. But also they've noticed when people are in the zone that it's one of the waves that start to come on. And so previously it was thought that it was just alpha. And then they realized, no, there's some gamma happening there. And anytime you have gamma, there's often what they call epsilon, which is the very, very slowest brain waves. And so that's an area that's still kind of getting figured out. It's newer. The research is still going on. But what's coming out is that we can absolutely stimulate an abundance of those waves and get some interesting results for consciousness, spiritual connectedness, that kind of thing. And super learning also helps with memory and retention. And they're looking into even people that suffer from Alzheimer's or dementia, wanting to increase their gamma production, or their, how many gamma waves they're producing, because it's linked to memory, especially long-term memory. And so there's some interesting stuff to look at there.
Fascinating. Now, Leigh, you spoke about rhythm, and you also spoke about dominance. So that can take us into the realm of music and the effect that it has on our consciousness. You talk about entrainment.
Yes.
That if someone is in beta and they are stressed out, and as hypnotherapists, we want to get them out of beta, so that we can get that mind into the alpha, theta, and it'd be awesome if we could get to gamma. But what are some of those tools that can entrain and get that mind to slow on down?
All right. Well, first, so that people understand the use of the term entrainment, it's when we have we're using one rhythm in order to affect another rhythm that's typically, in this case, a biorhythm. So our brainwave activity is a biorhythm. And so an external rhythmic response, if it's in the general vicinity of what our brain is doing, it can lead and pace the brain waves to slow down, to speed up. So that's the process of entrainment, where you're just coaching and leading brainwave activity to either step up or step down. And we can use sound and music as a carrier for those rhythms to do that. But I do see, and I know that people intuitively do this when they know that they need, to unwind or whatnot. And that's when people go to their favorite music, whether it's dance music. Some people like to do it through movement, where you have that beat and that rhythm is present, some people want to do it through listening to Mozart or Beethoven or something, where it's just they like the textures of the music. And the thing is, even if there's not a specific entrainment brainwave activity that's happening with these pieces of music, overall, there's an engagement that our brain does. It automatically starts moving more into an alpha when we're listening to music, especially music that we enjoy.
That we enjoy, yeah.
Right. And if we have an association to it, maybe we grew up with it and we love the lyric or that melody, now we have an additional reinforcement for why it's going to have a positive effect. Even if it's music that some people might go like, how can you listen to that? You know, the Metallica music is so, you know, distorted and loud and fast. You know what? If somebody likes it, that's almost more important than what it sounds like.
Yeah.
In that context. So, you know, I would encourage anybody just to remember, you always have that. Just turn on your favorite music. It's going to help you to feel better. It's going to help you unwind and release some stress and get your mind off of your troubles for a bit. However, we do produce music that we know has an even greater capacity to do that, to shift and help people to release stress and shift their perspective and their mindset. And that's where we get into entrainment music itself, where we're using longer stretched out notes. So it just sounds much slower. Changes happen over a much slower period of time. And that automatically kind of intuitively tells us we can slow down and settle down, start breathing more deeply. And we use tones that are a lot like monks chanting, this kind of Om-like quality to it, because historically it's got the most resonance. And the people of India, for instance, call it Om. You know, the sound of the universe is Om, and they kind of figured it out that this hum or this vibrational force that's present in the universe exhibits itself also through sound in a way that gets people to calm down, slow down, and get more connected. And so there are different ways we can tap into that, different textures and things that coach us psychologically and physically to slow down, you know, to let the stress just go by the wayside, you know. So that's what I've been doing, of course, is composing music that has that purpose in mind, that it's enjoyable, but the conscious mind doesn't worry about where the melody is going or what the rhythm is. It becomes background enough so that a person's own experience can take the forefront, so that whether it's just tuning in to see how they're doing in their body, or a perspective shift on an issue that they're dealing with, or just being open to feeling connected to spirit or source, you know. These are all just different things that we can do when we get into that layer of consciousness.
Excellent. And you spoke to the term resonance.
Yes.
You know, we connect resonance with a vibrational frequency, and certainly everyone has their own signature frequency. And when we want to induce or support, you know, a more healing resonance, that's where we would apply the specific tones or frequencies. Right. And that takes me to the binaural beats that a lot of people are, you know, including in music. And so there's a lot of talk about whether or not to use those beats with music. Does it interfere with the resonance of the music? Should you use the beats alone and just focus on the music?
Okay. I have both an educated response to that and an opinion about that.
Yeah.
So the science on it is that a binaural beat happens when you separate two tones, one in your left ear and one in your right, and that by how different they are, let's say one is a value of 100 cycles per second, and the other one is 110 cycles per second. The difference between the two is 10. Therefore, the beat frequency is 10 cycles per second, which puts you right at the peak of alpha and the beginning of beta, let's just say. And so that beat frequency, however, because we're using binaural beats, you have to use headphones. It's separated. So those two tones are not really combining in the air to produce that third differential beat rhythm. Your brain knows that it's supposed to be there. So it generates it internally. And that's the benefit of that approach, is it engages the brain in actually producing something. And so that's its benefit. And it also produces a hemispheric synchronization where the two halves of the brain, because they have to share data to produce this third rhythm, they're balancing out. So those are the benefits to binaural beats. The detriment or the downside is you have to use headphones for that particular approach. And when you do mix it into music, sometimes that can interfere if you want it to be present enough. It's so you kind of have to weigh if that's the way you want to go about it or not. Personally, I no longer use binaural beats due to the fact that it relies on headphones. A lot of people aren't in the position they want to use headphones. They want to have the speakers off to the side and still have something go on. But what we found is two different things. One, that there's what's called an isochronic tone. And they found that as far as entrainment itself, isochronic tones are more powerful than binaural beats. And all an isochronic tone is, it's a rhythm that goes on and off in a regular pattern. So where the volume is what is being modulated, up and down and at a specific frequency, let's say 10 again. And that can be embedded within any music soundtrack or any song, technically. And then you just find a volume level where it's, I say that just below obvious awareness is fine, to where if they're not paying attention to it, they wouldn't notice it was there. But there's enough of an oscillation happening that the brain does pick it up. But I would say, it's not going to be that effective if you embed it in Lady Gaga's music. It's, her rhythms are going to overtake the isochronic or the binaural, whatever you try to put in there, So it's subtle enough that you need to have the right type of music to present it as the carrier wave, let's just say. And so the soothing music or the long stretched out or om-like types of ambient soundtracks are best for that. So aside from that, that's how we do scientific entrainment, where you want to specifically produce a result in the listener to a specific brainwave state. If you're not having to be that specific, I personally think you oftentimes just don't even need the rhythmic entrainment at all. Maybe it's opinion, but it's kind of over the years of looking at things, I've realized that the first thing that's tuning us into having a physiological and psychological response is the texture, the sound quality of music we're listening to. And so when it's very soothing and ambient and it feels expansive, that's more of a clue than any rhythm, and also when it has that like low vibrational hum to it, that resonance, I think, is more powerful than any entrainment beat frequency. And so time and time again, if people are listening to just those kinds of elements, they will go into a nice, usually deeper than alpha state, just by listening to that. Close your eyes and breathe and just let that soundtrack take you someplace. And I find that that's the real power of that kind of music. It's still entrainment and, technically, but it's just not targeting using a beat frequency to get you to a specific state. It allows you to go where you need to go. And I tend to like to produce that way with the music, because that way if somebody needs just a break and get into a nice alpha, that's where they'll go. If they need something deeper, they'll just go there. And nothing's going to interfere with that.
Right. So it's not about taking over and controlling where the person goes. It's a better tool to allow instead.
It's an allowing, creating a space where they can move within it how they need to for that moment. Sometimes people don't even know what that is until they engage in it,
Right. And that part of us that's inside, the one that knows all things, that part knows exactly what we need in that moment. Yeah. Beautiful. Now, no headphones. You spoke earlier about the sound table and how those vibrations that come through the speaker actually create a resonance with the cells.
Right.
But when a person puts those headphones on, of
Yeah.
course, it's not resonating with the rest of the body, and it's going in through the eardrums.
Uh-huh.
Can you speak a bit about that fascinating vagus nerve?
Oh,
And
the sure.
yes.
That nerve runs throughout our entire body, and it informs our endocrine system, what it's doing. So it has a lot to do with regulation and hormones and everything else. And so then it has a lot to do with chemical messengers throughout the body. And the idea of whether we have physical sound waves affecting our physical body versus just the eardrums. The one thing is, if we are using headphones, the eardrums are converting that sound into electrical impulses, and our brain is then experiencing that and doing its thing about whether it's releasing this hormone or this brainwave. Neurotransmitter. Thank you. And so there's still stuff that's going on that affects the rest of the body. And so you get a sense of resonance through what the brain is doing in its experience to these sounds coming in. However, I do think that if you have the opportunity, it is more powerful to have physical sound interacting with your body. And you can still do that by, just turning on your stereo system. It doesn't have to be loud, but just the sound waves moving through the air. And yeah, if you have a subwoofer or a nice system like that, that's great. Some people, if they sit in the car, not while they're driving, but if they sit in the car and they're sitting in the seat, the car is designed to fill the space with bass and stuff. You can get into a real nice state and feel all those vibrations sitting in your car, listening to it. So there's ways to do it, and if you want to additionally put headphones on, you can do that. The stereo imaging also does provoke that hemispheric synchrony in the brain, so that's always a good thing. That's the benefit side of using headphones. But even if you have your speakers placed near enough to you that you get that sense of stereo, the sense of left and right, you can still get that brain balancing effect. So I would encourage people to look at it that way. Set your speakers up where you get a sense of right and left and maybe a little bit of bass response in the room. Even if you have to lay on the floor to do it, you're going to get much more out of that kind of music when you're listening to it, because it's a whole body, mind, brain experience. But if all you can do is headphones because you're in a public place or something, by all means, it's still going to be helpful and help you to get into an altered state of relaxation. It's just whatever it is that's going to work for you at the time, but I wouldn't lock people into headphones by any means. I think there's a limiting concept there. Yeah.
And you answered my next question, Leigh. The sound table, you're in a space. How can someone recreate that? And so the car, perfect place. So I just invite everybody, knowing that Leigh is an awesome sound engineer. By the way, Leigh, the first purchase that I ever made of yours, and I remember it there at HMI, and that's Hypnosis Motivation Institute that we are both alumnus of in Tarzana, California. Awesome place for learning. But I purchased it in that bookstore.
Right.
That embarkation.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. That takes me there, and it still does today.
Nice. Thank you.
So everyone, please, Leigh, share where people can experience your music and purchase it. I mean, I have it on Beyond Hypnosis. You can see it right there in my store, but the main source of it is right there on Leigh's site. What's your site, Leigh?
If they go to hypnosismeditationmusic.com, they'll get to my main website and see all the different things I have to offer. Excuse me. So I have a shop which has all of the different albums and everything I've done over the last 20 years. It's in there. Additionally, then if they go to YouTube and they type in my name, I have some stuff that pops up that they can check out. But even on my website itself, I have a video page that if they go to, it loads all of my YouTube videos, so they don't have to leave the site. So people can check it out that way. There's samples on everything.
Yes. But I just admonish everyone, please go over and experience that. And I love your guided meditations too. And Wazoo is that the
Wansu. Yeah, yeah,
Wansu.
yeah. Wansu. That's a dynamic.
Amazing journey. Ancient Chinese warrior,
That's
right?
right. That's
Yeah,
right.
beautiful. Merlin. I mean, please go over to the site. You will just be so glad that you did. It's a beautiful experience for you. You know, Leigh, I'm just excited to have you here. I
Yeah.
just have to say I I think about you often, and
Thanks.
I'm so grateful that you partnered with me. You know, to grace me to have your music there on my site, so that everybody comes on over there as an extension of your site. You know, to just partake of things that can be healing. You know, and these days we all need to be taking care of ourselves in wonderful ways.
Yeah.
Um, I just wanted to bring about, of course, I want to talk about Rife. I don't know.
Rail
You
Rife.
know, yes, Royal Rife is so important. So make sure we get back to that. But also this 5G that's coming on board. You know, that those EMF waves. You
Yeah.
know, can
Stronger.
we support ourselves? Can we kind of counteract a lot of that with music and sound? Do you think?
I think there's an effect to
Hmm.
that we can produce that's positive using sound and music.
Hmm.
It's not the same as people thinking we can block EMF or somehow harmonize it so that it's no longer doing anything to us. I'm not even sure the supposed technologies that say they can do that even really do that. I
Right.
could, but I haven't seen real science on it. But what I can say is that when we do take time out, every day to sit with sound and music, even if it's not the kind of music we're talking about, but
I
something,
love what you just said. That
yeah,
you just, I just thought of, the hills are alive with the sound of music,
right.
and
That's
they
a
really are.
that's a segue into the solfeggio thing right there.
Oh, all right. Let's get to that too.
But yeah, just tuning in to allowing our mind and body to calm and relax as a daily practice
Mm.
is probably one of the better things we can do for ourselves because we already have enough going on, and like you say, with the EMF, we don't know what it's doing and how much exposure we're getting.
Right.
But if we stay in a tense state, it's certainly giving that radiation more ability to do nefarious things to us. And so if we can hit reset, get that experience of harmony in our mind and body as a daily practice, then at least it's something we can do to have a more resilient kind of beingness when it comes to being out in the world, bombarded by who knows what. And like you said, 5G coming online, all kinds of stuff. Who knows if it's going to have a, even more direct impact on us or not? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're sitting there trying to make it more suitable for human consumption, so to speak.
Right?
It'd be nice if they were mindful of that, but
Yeah.
can't count on
We just have to follow the money, right?
it, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you said the sound of music, and then so that reminded me of that solfeggio thing, because what's that song, that do re mi song, right?
Do, re, mi. Yes, from the sol la ti do.
Yeah, do a deer, a female deer, re a drop of sun. So that song signifies what the real solfeggio was, and historically, up until that movie was produced. Basically, like 1,000 years ago, that's what a Benedictine monk had created, this system for notation, for teaching Gregorian chant music to the choir. And so you had the notes written down, but it would help the memorization of it by associating a different syllable, do or re or mi, to different note values, so that the scale would be memorized much more easily. So it's just a didactic device to help the learning, and it stuck for a long, long time. And up until equal temperament tuning, or when basically a few hundred years ago, they started shifting away from that. And officially, they had done away with it entirely in the 1800s. And so that's what it was. It was just a way of notating and teaching singers how to memorize the scale modes more easily, and it just gave the music a quality, as well. If there was no lyric, to using syllables to make things kind of different. But where it comes into our modern, much more modern, the last several years, when people talk about solfeggio frequencies, it's a little different. There's a reference to that old system, but that's not really where that's coming from. And there's a try to remember his name, Dr. Palaio, I think was his name. In the 70s, this doctor had, I guess, been studying these old do-re-mi type of notation system. And then he's a biblical, I don't know if he's a scholar or just an interested person, but he used Pythagorean math on the old tunings that were used way back when, and determined that there was these whole number sequences that were coming out that, according to him, matched some biblical verses.
Interesting.
It is interesting. And then he started to kind of look into that, and over time came up with an idea of what these different frequencies were useful for. And so I haven't experimented a whole lot with them. It's on my list of to-dos. But I'll have to say, until I get my hands on it, I don't know.
Right.
There's, as you heard, it's, one man's kind of quasi-scientific excursion into something to try and see if there's something to it. If people work with it and resonate with it, then it's great. Like the 528 frequency is that of universal and higher love consciousness, right?
Yes, and I've read DNA repair as well.
Right. So these things sound great, and I hope that
they sound good.
People that listen to those. And so there's releasing yield. There's this 6 different frequencies. And so I plan to kind of look more into it. The only way I know how to do that is to create a soundtrack that's, using that, and then just kind of put it out there and see what feedback I get. Because you can't get an empirical type of scientific study on that too easily. It's just anecdotal. And so a lot of people do feel that those frequencies are doing something for them. But again, you know what? Intention has a lot to do with it. Anytime you have a soundtrack that by its very nature is soothing and allowing for relaxation and expansion, your intention plus that is going to equal a result. So that's why it's tough. It's tough to say that these frequencies are absolutely going to do something that's that specific. I'm interested and I'm open-minded, but I'm still investigating it. I think the jury's still out on that. Yeah. But it's become very popular, and so I will be looking into it more.
And as all creators, I mean, all of us are creators. You specifically are definitely a sound creator. A lot of that is going to be, as you said, a personal experience, through intention and attention.
Right.
So yeah, you get out of everything, what you're trying to put into it.
Yes. The participation. Yeah.
There it is in that creative mode. And so that takes me to that next kind of controversial healing of sound. Royal Rife's work. There are a lot of sound generators out there. A lot of people use them to zap bugs, if you will, to entrain cells back to health. What's your take on that?
I think that has more science behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, with experiments that have been done and cataloged. And then, at a given point in time, the American Medical Association clamped down on it, and many years ago decided that was they were going to ban it.
Yeah.
And it's controversial because, depending on who you talk to, on the one hand, some people are like, well, it was banned because it's quackery. And, they know that?
Do
That's the stance. And then the other side is that it was banned because it was actually producing results that didn't put money in the pockets of the pharmaceutical companies and such. And so I lean that way, even though I wasn't there to empirically make a decision. But nonetheless, there's been enough studies after this, and over time, people like Hulda Clark, for instance, she's written books showing the results of some tests that she had done using Rife frequencies, and it, inevitably, people started creating machines that you could, excuse me, hold on to the two bars so the electrical current's passing through you with these particular frequencies going on, and there's a lot of people that swear by it, that things that are hard to treat otherwise, like there's people with Lyme disease that get results that it helps them using the Rife frequencies and all kinds of stuff. And so it does no harm. So I mean, it makes sense because there's a scientific idea there. This frequency, breaks down the cell wall of this particular virus, and then there's, they were smart enough to keep watching and realizing when that virus opened, there was a bacteria inside of it. You better get the frequency to take care of that one too, or else, and so they're going that far into it. There's something there. And in Europe, it doesn't have the same ban. I mean, I don't know per country what the different laws are, but I believe it's Germany that allows you to go to a doctor, and they're not limited. They can use a Rife machine to help facilitate your healing. So, whether they notice the empirical evidence to suggest that it's repeatable for good result, or they're just allowing it to happen as a possibility, I don't know. But over here, I really feel that it was clamped down based on the money. And so, and then when it comes down to sound as a delivery for those frequencies, I've spent on and off plenty of time debating whether that's something that we could even expect to have a similar result. And I'm still not sure yet. I kind of go back to that frequently to see if those particular Rife frequencies delivered through sound would have the same result as delivered through the electrical current.
Right.
I don't know yet. I'm still kind of looking at that. So there are frequencies that we can use with sound and music that aren't necessarily Rife, but that can produce different results physiologically. The thing we can count on most is when we can deliver a soothing vibration to a specific area of the body. We can reduce muscle tension in specific areas. We can get organs to kind of release tension around them. We can adjust a person's blood pressure to normalize. And so there's things that we can do that they're certainly helping the physical body, and that's a pathway to restoring health and balance without getting too technical, too critical, even though depending on who you talk to, they might have their own secret library of frequencies. I mean, I've got tons of frequencies, and I haven't tested them all, that I've gotten from different places. And, it really takes a dedication of time to unravel all of that. But I certainly don't think it harms anything for people to investigate and experience that.
Interesting. It kind of synchronistically, Leigh, I had a dream about minerals. When you break minerals down, what are they but crystals?
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And when we have a balance of the proper minerals in our bodies, of course, along with the vitamins, then we've got these minerals that are floating around, or these tiny crystals that are floating around. And what are crystals? They are conductors of energy.
Right.
And that just kind of came to me, and it hit me that that when hit the body, which is this soup of conducting stuff, the seawater that is within us,
Right.
right? The minerals that are floating around, we are conducting all of the vibrational frequencies that we come into contact with, whether it is through our ears or our bodies. And I just thought that that was a fascinating thought that, when people are not, nutritionally sound, that the body begins to break down because they don't have the right amount of crystals floating around for this conductivity so that everything can flow as it should. And I thought that was interesting.
It is actually. No, I got a little chill on you telling me that
Mm-hmm.
because I think there's really something to it that because when the sound, for instance, is traveling through the cells of our body. I mean, when you lay there for a while, let's say 20 minutes, you're getting this harmonious energy moving, and all the cells are all sharing that same frequency together.
Right.
But when the music goes down, you still feel a buzz for about 5 minutes.
Yes.
And I think it's the cells themselves, like that crystal matrix of what you're talking about, and everything moving together. It's holding and transmitting that frequency, just like the water experiments holding on to a frequency.
Yes.
Right?
Emotos work. Yes.
So
Powerful.
that there's really something to that we are receivers and conductors of this energy, and that we can imprint either harmony or disharmony. And our minds, are doing that all the time. And that's why if we have a disharmonious experience within our mind or emotion, our body can take that on. So it's really kind of in our best interest to be mindful of that. Not always an easy thing, but if we can, at least bring in as much harmony as we can,
And as hypnotherapist, the cool thing, and I like to say, I get to offer tools, for that very reason, to remind people of who they really are and great power that's right there within them. To go back to a scriptural reference, the kingdom of heaven is right there within you.
Right.
And you get to choose, what you are focusing your attention on and your intentionality, because you're creating in every moment. And it's nobody else's fault. Nobody's coming to rescue you. It's you.
We got to do our work on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fantastic stuff. I'm so glad that you made it here. Anything else that you would like to share? Anything new that's coming up for you that you'd like others to know about?
I am currently working on some gamma recording, and so I'm taking my time with it to make sure it's hitting all the marks properly. And I'll be releasing it first through iAwake, a company that I've been working with for the last 2 or 3 years. And they distribute some of my products, but also I've made some recordings, in tandem with them. Great company. I encourage everybody to check out iawaketechnologies.com.
It's spelled I, like as in on the visual I, awake?
Like the letter I.
Oh, the letter I, okay.
iawaketechnologies.com.
Okay.
Really good company. So I'll be finishing a gamma recording as well as an acoustic entrainment collection that ultimately will be released with them. And then subsequently after that, I'll put it on my site. So I'm working on those things as well. I've been doing, through my website, custom entrainment music based on a person's astrological information.
Love it.
Going all the way through all the different elements. I just take the key basic things and create an interpretation into the sound resonance environment, so that when they're listening to it, it's a reflection of what their sun and their moon and ascendant or the way the elements are kind of arranged in their overall chart. It expresses it through music, And so it becomes a way that I can create something custom to a specific person. And so that the intention is when that they listen to it, they are able to access not just the calm and the ability to release stress and maybe get into a nice meditative or hypnotic state, but something that hopefully is unique enough for them, that something resonates, so that inner wisdom has that avenue to wake up or to kind of come to the forefront. And so it's something that they can go to when they have that need to search within or just to unwind or relax, but if they know it's for them. And so that's something that I do offer through my website. And so that's a cool thing.
I love that. Leigh, if you don't mind, later on, give me a link so that I can, have people go right to your site to get that. That's awesome service. I mean, I also, look at the nodes. I don't go deep into I look at the north and the south nodes of clients to see where they are and look at that soul purpose.
Yeah.
And try to create something that resonates so that they can be all that they are supposed to be,
right.
Whatever their soul's intention is this time around. And I can definitely connect with what you're doing. That's beautiful. Look forward to that.
Yeah. It took time to figure out how to do it because before I figured out how I was going to approach it, it was just kind of a thing that, it's just going to take too much time, to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to just kind of figure out a kind of somewhat of a formula for me to approach it compositionally, mm-hmm. to make it to where I can get right in there and do it, and it's still going to be affordable for people to be able to do it. And right now I have a sale price on it, so it's even more affordable than it might normally be. And it takes me a couple of weeks to get one put together. I sit with it, I look at it, and it's just not done until I know it sounds good, and then it's ready to send off. But yeah, it took a little time, and then something clicked. I was like, okay, I can do it like that, and make it available to people. Because before that, the time versus cost wasn't working out.
Right. You do have to factor that in because there's so many things that we want to do as creative people. Yeah. Awesome. Everything is all about sound. Math comes into that, right?
Yeah, it's all vibration, really. I mean,
space, time.
In the first book of, what is it, in John in the Bible, it reprises what it says in the opening of Genesis, right? Mm-hmm. The Genesis says is in the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth, but then in John it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was the light of men. And the more you read that and you look at it, you're looking at how it's this intention and this vibration, and sound is a way to look at that it's almost synonymous, vibration, sound. And we speak of sound in terms of what we hear. We have the organs of hearing. But what we're really talking about is vibration. And, even our eyes pick up a vibration of, light and color, and it's just this faster vibration. Our physical bodies pick up the slowest waves of the actual physical sense of vibration, so it's all the same stuff. And it's vibrational frequencies out there. And so when we look at things that way, we there's a certain metaphysical logic that starts taking over, and then we use words like resonance, and it makes sense beyond the scientific typical use of the word. When we resonate with something, it's because it's aligning with us in a way that invigorates.
And it sounds true, right? The language.
That's right.
Very interesting.
There's definitely something to that. Or when we're interacting with other people, we get a vibe. We use the word vibe off of them. Because I think, our energy, our vibrational essence, or whatever you want to call it, interacts with somebody else, and we get maybe a subconscious impression from that before they even open their mouth and say anything. And sometimes what we get that way doesn't always match what they're presenting to us consciously, and so we got to be aware of, maybe there's a reason you feel that call it intuition, call it whatever. And we have to pay attention to it. But then if we use that kind of idea in moving through our lives, that there is a reality about vibration, everything breaks down to that in some level, then maybe that helps us to navigate a little bit more truer to our course, getting through life.
I completely, totally agree. You just said something about the various vibrational frequencies and how this apparatus that I call a physical body, we have this physical body that we've taken on. It's kind of a 3-dimensional spacesuit, right? That discerns all of these vibrational frequencies that we're getting, whether we're getting them through sight, through sound, through the tactile sensations that we feel. It's all the same thing, right? It's vibration. It's just on different rates. And the eyes pick it up. These ears pick it up. The skin picks it up.
Right.
It's amazing.
Antennas, basically.
Yes, as you said, we are transmitters and receivers constantly. So the key to being able to stay attuned, as you said, being aware of maybe why you have a certain feeling that someone isn't resonating and what they're saying is very different from what you're picking up. One of the keys to stay sensitive to those things and to stay aware is to go into the alpha state.
Sure. Absolutely.
Relax as often as possible.
Yeah.
Right? Doing that inner work helps you to finely tune your tuning fork, if you will.
Yeah. The more we do it, the more that capacity is there with us all of the time. Mm-hmm. Not just when we're going into a specific meditation time or doing some inner processing. The more we do it, the more that awareness becomes a big, part of our bigger experience of ourselves. And and so it's a tool. It's a practice, but it becomes a tool, tool of consciousness that we have to be more aware, more awake.
I love it. You hear that, family? Illuminations Media Network family, wake up and stay awake. Go on to Leigh's website, meditation.
hypnosismeditationmusic.com.
Yes. Beautiful. Leigh, this has been amazing. I'm hoping that you'll come back on again and we won't wait another decade this time. And you haven't aged a bit. I just have to say that. It'll be a little longer next time. Well, I thank you, Leigh, and I thank everyone for joining us here again on the Illuminations Media Network. And remember, the astounding metaphysician of my grandmother who said, get your head together first, and your ass will follow. Peace and blessings. Until next time.